Good evening. This is Brown at IF Brown. Hope everyone's doing all right this evening. And I just wanted to, thank y'all very much for, being with me on this ride as we've, talked about the series Arion Lord of Atlantis. And we are finally here at the end of the series. And it's been a fun ride. I know I've enjoyed reading it and talking about it, and I hope, that y'all have enjoyed hearing about it. It's been a very unique series that managed to combine fantasy with science fiction, and it gave us a world that was inhabited by some fascinating characters, and it was always I really enjoyed just being able to read the series from beginning to end. And I also appreciate the fact that the original creative team of writer Paul Kupperberg and artist Jan Duursema were able to be there for the series end. And not many books can, lay claim to that. Some series, they'll have it to where, the end is, put together by a different creative team entirely. But in this case, though, Paul Kupperberg and Jan Duursema, they were able to end the series. I feel that it was, for the most part, on their own terms, even though there were some concepts and some storylines that, it would have been neat to see them explore further, in the ongoing series. I think that, all things considered, the fact that they were able to, wrap up as many of the plot threads as they were able to at this, point was very impressive. And so the issues we're going to be talking about are issues 34, 35, last but not least, this special from 1985 that DC put out 2 months after the end of the ongoing series. There's a lot going on here on the cover. So even though, the ongoing series ended with issue number 35, the story officially ended, as far as, the original series is concerned, with this special here. It was 2 months after the ongoing series. But I think, the fact that, they were able to, accomplish as much as they were, able to within this, small amount of issues, was very impressive. So the whole thing starts off here with, there were several plot threads that have been mentioned, here and there throughout the series. Like they might have, gotten some more focus at the beginning of the series, but, they're kind of, relegated to a background. But, this time, they're kind of coming to the forefront. One of the things is the fact that, the force of magic is diminishing within the world at this point. And Arion is, at this point in time, the most powerful mage on the planet, and he has, the most, magic out of all the mages, that are still in existence at this point. And there's a gathering of mages that's going to be held in Atlantis, so they can, confer and try and figure out, how they can remedy the situation. Because, while Atlantis does have technology, for one thing, this technology is literally powered by magic, including the hover cars. And so the fact that, magic is diminishing, across the board is a major problem. And so during this meeting, it turns out that there's a mage among them who has his own ulterior motives, and he actually is able to pose a threat to Arion, because while Arion was predominantly focused on white magic. This rival mage, his name was Lord Regime. Lord Regime was covertly practicing in the dark arts, and he focused on, I believe they were called necromantic magics, stuff that was forbidden, since regular magic, was the magic that was diminishing at this point. The dark arts were kind of in ascendance, and so Lord Regime was able to try and usurp Arion as the top mage in Atlantis, and he was also wanting to take over as the ruler of Atlantis, because after the suicide of the king, his son is ruling Atlantis in his place, but the son in question was actually someone who was very unpopular with the people of Atlantis. And in fact, the two people that seem to have a chance of running Atlantis are in fact Arion himself, as well as Tagala, who was the late king's estranged daughter. And Tagala, she's very skilled when it comes to, say, warfare leadership, but running a kingdom is something that she's not exactly, got her eye on. But at the same time, though, Arion, while he's definitely willing to accept the fact that he is the most powerful mage in Atlantis at this point, and he's the leader of this gathering of mages, he refuses to take over as leader of Atlantis as a whole. But unfortunately, this rival mage, he's unleashing these, amongst other things, these demonic bats that are like, sort of a combination of, living things as well as pure shadow, and anything that they fly over turns to ash. And so at this point, Arion is nearly consumed by this dark magic, but he's able to salvage the day and send Lord Regime basically into a place where he ends up being consumed by forces that he ended up summoning, because it turns out that there are all these dimensions that were kind of tied into the magic that Regime was working with, and he had tried to exile Arion at one point in this dark dimension, but Arion was able to use his magic to fight his way back and send Lord Regime in his place, and to be devoured by the monsters that lived there. And so one crisis is averted, although there is still the problem of diminishing magic, and Arion still being the one sorcerer that it might be able to save the day as far as that goes. But even though he's defeated this rival mage, and basically made some form of safety for democracy, there's another development on the horizon. Turns out that there's a ship heading towards Earth. It's a spaceship, and it turns out that the people on board were aliens. And then it turns out that the aliens were in fact ancient Atlanteans, because earlier on in the series, there was some throwaway dialogue, or I should say seemingly throwaway dialogue, that referred to ancient explorers that headed out from Earth to the stars, using ships that were powered by magic. And so but but that was kind of the most you ever heard of them. But space travel had been accomplished at this point. But it's just that there wasn't really much of any focus on it other than lip service. But it's been like hundreds, if not thousands of years, since anyone in Atlantis has heard from any of these ancient explorers. But it turns out that they've been able to use new forms of science and technology to survive in the far reaches of space where they initially were exploring. But over time they had become mutated through all the stuff that they were exposed to, both I guess in terms of cosmic exploration as well as the fact that they were switching from Atlantean magic to I guess alien technological magic, if you want to call it that. But they're radically different from what they used to be. I mean, they literally look alien at this point, humanoid but alien. And so they've come to Earth to reclaim Atlantis as their own, as well as the planet itself. But then to make things even more complicated, the chaos god Kaon chooses this time to rear his ugly head, and we hadn't seen him since issue 15. But while Arion had defeated him, Kaon is literally a god, and while you might be able to say defeat a physical form, all he has to do is just send his essence back into his realm, as it were, and he can just come back another day. And so it's been since issue 15 that we've seen him. And so he shows up in the special to basically pull the strings behind the scenes. And and he's been trying to come up with a plan to get back at Arion for defeating him. But then when this happens, with the arrival of the ancient Atlanteans, this is something that he couldn't have planned better, even if he had tried. And so it was just all happy coincidences, I guess. Add to that, you also have the old enemy of Sinet, the demi-human jackal. And so he gets involved, and once he sees this spaceship, he realizes that he learns that they mean to conquer Atlantis. And since he has a grudge against Arion and his ilk, he decides to see basically who's flying that ship, and see if he can take part in their schemes. And so you got all these things going on here, and with a chaos god pulling the strings, and then you have Arion and his friends trying to salvage the day. I mean, it's a pretty tough sell as far as them trying to save the day, as it were. But anyway, though, things end, characters live, characters die, and Atlantis does sink. And I mean, a lot happens within this small amount of issues here, but at the same time, I don't want to say outright spoil everything. But I will say, though, that it's like there's plans within plans at work here, mainly on the part of the villains, but also, of course, you have the good guys trying to come up with ways to, combat the situations. They solve one problem and they have to put out another. And but yeah, when Atlantis finally does sink, though, the way it happens, you get the idea that it's, the end of an era. And while Arion is able to save a good portion of Atlantis, the people, if not the actual physical land, I mean, he realizes that there are some things that he and his friends aren't ever they're not ever going to be able to get it back. I mean, the best they can do is savor the life that they have, and try and be good shepherds for the survivors of Atlantis. And I also liked how the character of Sinet, and as well as the character of Kaon, the fact that they were given the amount of focus that they were in this final story, because in my opinion, at least, they're both very good villains. And they weren't used as extensively as, say, Garn was, but when they were used very well, especially the character of Sinet. Sinet being the kind of guy who, was definitely a villain, but he wasn't an idiot. Like, he had his, at least understandable reasons for doing what he was doing. But at the same time, you did want, the good guys to defeat him eventually, if not outright kill him, because he was such an interesting character. And Kaon, was a character that, the way he tended to be written, he just, delighted in chaos, much, like the nature of his being. I mean, he is a chaos god. But here in this final scheme, though, I mean, he rattles a lot of cages, causes a lot of chaos, a lot of people die, and a lot of people's faith in, their, established nature and stories, their I guess their stories of creation, as it were, their faith is shaken, which, I mean, is definitely bonus points for a chaos god. But yeah, and also I did like how each of the main characters are kind of given a point to shine within these final issues here. I mean, Arion, of course, because it's his series, but Lady Qian, Wind, Tagala, and even Mara, and so I, in my opinion, you can't really have a series end if you're not going to give the surviving characters their moment in their sun, even if it's just for a couple of pages. But I really liked the character Tagala, even though she was introduced right as the series was ending. They were able to make her into a very intriguing character, because, I mean, she stands out physically. I mean, she's, a tall Amazonian warrior woman, but at the same time, she's a very intelligent, very endearing character. And I liked her rapport with the Wind, and it was good to see him back in action. I did like how, even though he was physically restored, to his, normal human self, Arion, was able to, I mean, he was unable to fix him 100%, because, I mean, it showed that, Arion was powerful with his, newly acquired magic, but there were some things that were done to, Wind that not even he could, 100% cure. And so you see Wind as, kind of the opposite of how he used to be, whereas, before, he was more level-headed and compassionate, and caring, especially with Mara. Now he's, a lot more gun-ho and bloodthirsty when it comes to combat, and, a lot more hedonistic when it comes to, say, the opposite sex. But yeah, that's where, Mara sort of, she had a crush on him, but when she sees Wind like this, and the fact that Arion wasn't able to 100% restore him to his normal self in terms of his psychological nature. This kind of sends Mera into you know a tailspin. And Wind in the meantime ends up hooking up with Tagala, because at this point they're both very similar in terms of personalities, and they actually make a pretty good battle couple too. When they're being invaded by the subhuman army that, or I should say, the submen army, that Sinet was able to come, get together and attack Atlantis with, but also, Lady Qian, I like the fact that, she, continues to be, a loyal friend and companion to Arion, as well as a more than capable, captain of the guard. And you see a lot of improvisation on her part, say when it comes to the fact that, when she realizes that she can't use, some of her weapons that were powered by magic, she ends up, going, with weapons that are just straight up normal weapons, but she's still able to put up more than a capable fight against the enemies. But yeah, so and also I liked how you kind of got a glimpse into all these other aspects of Atlantean lore, and it was fascinating to see, say, like, all these other races that apparently had been living on Atlantis this whole time, or at least throughout the world. But it would have been cool if these things that, say, had been hinted at since the beginning of the series had been given more exposure. I guess if the series hadn't ended with issue 35, it would have been cool to have more exploration of the lore of all these other people and their cultures, since instead of just getting a glimpse of all that. But I guess that's kind of one of the drawbacks, with having a series end sooner than the creative team originally planned. But I mean, they were able to offer us just enough to say that hey, there's more to the world of Atlantis than what you're seeing on the page here. But unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see any more of it since the series is ending. So yeah, it was kind of a mixed blessing, because it showed that there was a whole world out there to explore, but we're not going to be able to see it anymore since the series ended when it did. But at the same time, I mean, you got Arion having some really good final battles. I mean, you had him go up against a fellow mage who had gone to the dark side, so to speak, and then you had you saw his skills at improvisation when it came to magic, as well as just combat in general. And then you saw him being confronted with the legacy of Atlantis' past, in the form of the ancient Atlanteans that have come to Earth, and that was something that I really thought was intriguing. But much like all these other cultures that we only got a glimpse of, that was kind of the same downside with these ancient Atlanteans. I mean, as cool as it is to see them and find out what happened to them, it's only at the end of the series that we see this, and it would have been neat to say explore their history a little more. But as it is, though, I mean, once the series, sorry, can't talk. But once the series legitimately ends, though, I mean, it's it's kind of bittersweet in the sense that Arion is able to save a significant portion of the population of Atlantis, but at the same time, Atlantis does sink. I mean, that cannot be changed. And so it's definitely the end of an era. I mean, within this universe, but it's also just the end of an era as far as a comic book series is concerned. I guess the era might be a little too dramatic since the series only lasted 35 issues plus a special. But at the same time, I guess you read a series from beginning to end, it kind of grows on you, and you get kind of an attachment to it. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but that's just kind of how I felt there. But yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and give this final arc 4 out of 5 stars. There were some things that I wish that had been developed a little more in terms of lore and concepts, but the fact that we were able to get the ending that we got, it was a good way for the series to go. But yeah, just real quick, I was going to show y'all something. This was in issue 34, but maybe you'll kind of understand what I'm talking about when it comes to, say, catching a glimpse of all these other cultures and races that inhabit the world of Atlantis. But this splash page right here, and this is kind of the conclave of the sorcerers. They're meeting, and you're seeing all these other races. We're just catching a glimpse of them. But the fact that we're seeing that all these other races exist. I mean, it's good artwork by Duursema, of course. But I really wish that there'd been more time to for the creative team to maybe have, say, Arion and his friends interact with all these other races. Because I mean, that they have their own cultures, their own lore. But at this point, all we know is that they exist, and I highly doubt that anyone's made a point to go back to this series and say write out what these people were like, what have you. But still, just the fact that we get to see that, hey, it's not just humans that live in Atlantis. I mean, we kind of already knew that, but there wasn't a whole lot of focus devoted to, say, who these races were other than the humans and, say, demi-humans. But yeah, it's it was definitely a reminder of how fascinating of a world this place was. And yeah, it's just it's been a good ride. Thank y'all very much for being a part of it with me. I really enjoyed doing these reviews, and I hope y'all have enjoyed hearing about this series from me. And yeah, just oh, one more thing. Okay, remember what I was saying about how the characters each get their moment to shine in this series, but I was going to show y'all a couple of pictures right here. But I love the artwork right here. Like, anytime Arion and Lei Qian were together, whether it be in combat or just in an idyllic moment like this, before the crap hits the fan, but just in a moment of calm and being able to just be with each other. It's just, you really see that these two love each other, and they're gonna stick together. Yeah, I mean, even without reading any of the dialogue, just the way that Duursema drew them, you could tell that they're a loving couple. And of course, once you actually read the dialogue, you're like, yeah, Paul Kupperberg gave us these two who they've got each other's backs. So let's see. Sorry, give me a sec here. But Tagala, she has a really cool moment too. I mean, she has a couple of cool moments here in the end. But when her brother, the sort of inept, replacement to the late king, he's murdered by the aliens, or by the ancient Atlanteans. But I like how, Jan Duursema drew her. I mean, after he's been vaporized, you see her crouching down, hunched over, clearly in grief, plus, from what the dialogue has. And then, you see this look of pure rage on her face. And then, oh yeah, payback time. Scares him off. Last but not least, well, I shouldn't say last but not least, but in terms of, like, say, the characters, oh yeah, Mara. One other thing I liked is that they didn't reveal everything about, say, certain plot threads or certain mysteries that have been, present throughout the series since the beginning. But one of the things about Mara was that she's a changeling, but she doesn't know for sure exactly how her abilities work. Just kind of guesses. But they kind of stick with that. There's not this moment where she suddenly realizes, oh yeah, this is what I gotta do. But it's more like, hey, she just jumps into the fray and hopes for the best. But we do get one last good look at her, in terms of her transforming, and she just dives off into the thick of it, and she becomes a sort of almost triceratops looking white dragon. But so yeah, I mean, oh, also just real quick, I love this picture. It almost looks like something Mike Mignola would draw, at least if you're looking at the shading and the lines and the shadows. But, or at the very least, a really good prog rock album cover. but no, I just it's a lot to look at in terms of artwork alone. But yeah, I mean, it's just it was a good ending to a series, and I was glad to have been able to read it, and I really appreciate y'all being a part of this ride with me. So y'all got any questions, comments, please let me know. I'd love to hear some feedback from y'all, and thanks again for being a part of the ride, and I hope y'all have enjoyed hearing about the series from me. And if it encourages you to look it up, by all means check it out. But y'all have a good night, take care, goodbye.